Beyond Reason Radio.
So I heard that nothing controversial at all happened on Twitter today. You know, it was just a nice, peaceful time on Twitter.
A ho-hum day?
Yeah, you know, everyone got along. Yeah. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Hmm?
Are you saying the cesspool was clean for a day?
Oh, if only, Tom Benson, if only. President Trump.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
Did it again. He did it again. And then the debate over why Trump does these things always fascinates me. It's always interesting. You have the super diehard Trump supporters who say, oh, it's 5D underwater chess. He's so smart that he knows what he's doing, and he's going to do, and it's going to all work in his favor in the long run.
Sure.
Then you have the far left who believe that he's Hitler. So this is just the beginning of the Trump Nazi dictatorship. You know, when Trump tweets out something like this. By the way, I'm going to read the tweet, I guess, in a moment. And then you have other people who suggest that this was all a distraction. There were bad economic numbers today, and he wanted to distract from that. So he tweeted out about mail-in voting to get people talking about it. There are other people that think he's just being honest. He wants to know, hey, why don't we delay the election? Because he really cares. And I'm one of those people that believes he doesn't think before he tweets. He just reacts.
That's right.
He understands. And the thing is, there's always a little grain of truth in some of these tweets that get a lot of controversy. And that's true of the one today. There's a good point to be made, but he does it in such a way where you don't even remember the point he's trying to make because it distracts from the actual real issue. So, you know, of course, we have to start with that and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, back again in the nighttime. I've been hosting the morning show all week.
Oh, man.
Which is all, you know, it's a lot of fun, but it's not quite the same as this show.
No room to breathe.
There's something special about hosting Beyond Reason Radio and doing the podcast and everything. So I wanted to at least get one episode of this show out for this week. And I thought tonight would be a good night, so I'm doing it. We're on until 8 p.m. here on News Radio WFL Orlando. And as I just mentioned, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available, especially on the iHeartRadio app. Just search Beyond Reason Radio. We're on Facebook Live as well. You can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. You can also follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. We have a lot to get to on the show tonight. I'm going to talk about different battles in the continuing Cold Civil War. Also going to talk about the tech leaders brought before Congress yesterday. And, you know, this is one issue where actually both sides agree, and I disagree with both sides. So you know, it's going to be an interesting show. And the voice you hear from the control room, once again, is Mr. Tom Benson. How are you, Tom?
I'm fine. Maybe the reason you like evenings so much is the producer.
You know, you got a point there, Mr. Benson. You got a point there.
Oh.
So,
happy to be here.
Good.
So what was the tweet? Tell everybody the tweet that got him in trouble.
Here it is. And by the way, I tweeted this out. Oh, I forgot to add another point of view reacting to the tweet, and I'm almost leaning towards this myself. I'm not going to lie. There are some who believe that he's trying to lose on purpose.
Oh.
And there's a part of me that wonders if he's trying to lose on purpose. Now, here's the tweet. He said, with universal mail-in voting, not absentee voting, which is good, 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote? So he suggests possibly delaying the election.
Which he has been accused of several times during the past 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, well, not only that, he's accused that he's going to delay the election, declare himself a dictator, implement martial law, and that's really what's going on in Portland, you see. It's martial law. Except that's not really what's going on in Portland. But when Trump tweets stuff like this out, he gives them ammunition.
Sure.
And I don't know how this helps. A lot of people on my Facebook today, on Twitter, are probably listening right now, are going to disagree with me on this, but I don't understand how stuff like this helps our side politically. I don't understand how this will help him get reelected. Now, people say, well, he got elected last time and people didn't understand. That's very true. You make a good point. I can't argue with that, except that he only got reelected by a few thousand votes in a few key states. It wasn't a massive landslide. He lost the popular vote, and there's no guarantee that that's going to happen again, especially since the Democrats won back the House in 2018 by a lot. So to suggest that this is all some master plan, Trump is invincible, it's guaranteed that he's going to win again, I just don't buy it. Now, he could win again. In fact, he has a good chance just because the person he's running against. I mean, the best thing to happen to Trump was Joe Biden winning the Democrat nomination. I mean, really. Mm-hmm. It was.
Sure.
When that's your guy that you're running against, he's hiding in his basement because he would rather Trump shoot himself in the foot rather than run against Trump. He wants to make this a referendum on Trump. Biden does not want to make this election about himself.
Of course not.
Because he'll lose. So he's trying to make it all about Trump. He thinks that will energize enough people that hate Trump to go out and vote for him. We'll see what happens. It's hard to do that. They thought that would happen with Hillary. It did not happen. But Trump defended himself a little bit. Do you have the 2 Trump cuts I gave you there? So this is him basically saying, look, he doesn't really want to delay the voting. He was making a point.
I don't want to delay. I want to have the election. But I also don't want to have to wait for 3 months and then find out that the ballots are all missing and the election doesn't mean anything. That's what's going to happen, Steve. That's common sense. And everyone knows it.
Everyone knows it.
Of course.
So he says he doesn't want to delay. But you know what? He makes an interesting point in the fact that there could be a very big issue when it comes to massive mail-in voting. Now, we've had mail-in voting in the past. Trump mentioned it, absentee voting. That's done by mail. We have early voting. We have different options to vote. And there doesn't seem to be a huge problem. It becomes a problem in certain states when they have what's called ballot harvesting, where they have people go out and not only take the ballots out to people, but then collect the ballots and then give them to
a smartphone.
No, I mean, actually, people collect these physical ballots and then take them in. But how do you trust the people who are often working for a certain campaign to take those ballots? So ballot harvesting is a big problem. So he makes an interesting point. In fact, let's play the second cut because he kind of expands further on this point.
And I don't want to see an election. So many years I've been watching elections. And they say the projected winner or the winner of the election. I don't want to see that take place in a week after November 3rd or a month or, frankly, with litigation and everything else that can happen, years, or you never even know who won the election. You're sending out hundreds of millions of universal mail-in ballots. Hundreds of millions. Where are they going? Who are they being sent to? It's common sense. You don't have to know anything about politics. And the Democrats know this.
To be honest, that's not a bad point. Because we have never done that for a presidential election in this country. Every presidential election, we have absentee voting, we have early voting, we have some mail-in voting, like I said. But we've never done anything like what is being suggested this time, where you could have tens of millions of people doing mail-in voting. Never done anything like that before. And it's a completely different system. And there's no way to check for fraud like we do in regular elections. So it could very well cause some issues. It could very well cause some problems. I totally get that. The problem that I have with his tweet is we're no longer going to focus on that problem. We're no longer going to be focused on the fact that maybe something should have been done about mail-in voting. Should be done about mail-in voting to make sure it's done correctly. Make sure there's no fraud. Make sure it's done safely. But instead, now all we're going to talk about is the fact that Trump suggested to delay the election. Now, as I said, a lot of people disagree with me, think this is fine because all he's doing is trolling the left. Don't you others see? He puts this out there like a laser pointer, and the Democrats are like cats and they chase it on the wall, you know. That's what Trump is doing here. And I get that to a certain extent. It could be very well what Trump is doing here. The problem is when Trump does stuff like this, it's not just Democrats who see it. It's not just people who are politically involved who see this. It's everyday Americans are also seeing this. Everyday Americans will find out about this tweet, and a lot of them will not like it. A lot of them will be concerned. And even though they don't like the left, they don't like Democrats, they're not going to be as energized to go out and vote for Trump. And we need them to be energized to go out and vote for Trump. That's the issue here. When you're president of the United States and you put out statements like this, you're not just talking to your base. You're not just talking to Republicans, and you're also not just talking to Democrats who hate you. You're talking to the vast majority of the American people. You're talking to all of the American people, actually, because you're the president. And when you suggest possibly delaying voting, which he doesn't have the power to do, it has to be done through an act of Congress. Trump has no authority to even go about doing that. When you talk about just delaying voting, it's going to be seen by a lot of people as a problem. So the focus now will be on Trump and what he did on maybe the issue, which could be a decent issue, that we've never had a vast amount of mail-in voting, which is being suggested now because of the pandemic. I think it's a problem, and there's still a part of me that wonders if this guy is really trying to lose or something. You know, my conspiracy theory here is... He knows he's going to lose. I don't know about it. People are going to be upset I said this, but part of me wonders if he knows he's going to lose, but wants to keep his base so he can make a TV show or a radio show or keep his audience after he's president. So he keeps these controversies going so his followers will follow him to whatever he does next. But you're president. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be focused on what's best for the country. We're going to continue this conversation in a moment and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Welcome back to another edition of Beyond Reason Radio. We did find out some sad news today in the country, especially if you're a conservative, as former CEO, former presidential candidate, and former conservative talk radio host Herman Cain died today. And it looks like it was because of complications from the coronavirus.
He had been fighting that for a month.
Yeah, they tweeted out on his Twitter page just a couple weeks ago that he seemed to be on the mend and seemed to be doing better, but it turned out that was not true. Now, he's been up to a lot of things politically. He took over for Neil Bortz on his show right after Neil Bortz retired. To be honest, I was not a huge follower of Herman Cain. I had nothing against the guy. I did not like his 999 plan. When he ran for president, that was the thing. He always said 999.
Had some fans.
It definitely had some fans. I didn't like it because it gave another avenue for the federal government to tax you. But I mean, he seemed like a good guy. He seemed like he believed in a lot of the same things I did. But of course, a lot of people now are blaming Trump for this because he went to the Tulsa rally. Now, Fox News did point out earlier today that he was tested right before that rally. So one reason he didn't wear a mask is he wouldn't have been able to get in and be near Trump if he had it. And he was tested and was tested negative. Some people think it's still Trump's fault because he possibly could have caught it at the rally. No real way to really know that. I think it's kind of irresponsible to just blame Trump for this or blame Herman Cain for this. But I do believe that this is a message to a lot of us that this virus is something we have to take seriously, especially if you're in the vulnerable category, which no doubt he was. He had diabetes and he had just beaten cancer. He was fighting cancer. And so if you're in that kind of condition, you got to take this seriously. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people in this audience who kind of believe either the virus is a hoax or we should just go through herd immunity. I was against the shutdowns because I think the shutdowns went too far. They caused more problems than they were worth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like I said, what do you do when the shutdowns are lifted? The shutdowns are being lifted, and now we have another spike, and now we're seeing the same thing in Europe. You know, it's not just here. Other countries are lifting the shutdowns, and they're having the same problems. And this was like, well, what did you expect? We all knew that this was going to happen. But I've never been one who say we should just, do nothing, especially when it comes to the vulnerable. I thought the first priority should be to protect the vulnerable. I'm not against mask wearing. I'm not against social distancing. I'm not against using hand sanitizer, steps they're taking at different places, or even canceling some major events where you have a lot of people crowded in a small area. It seems like one thing that really spreads this virus is if you're around a lot of people in an indoor area for an extended period of time. So I'm not against all these things. And this is kind of a message to us that we have to still take this virus very seriously. Yes, I believe that the left is using the virus to push another agenda. Yes, I believe that there has definitely been some fear-mongering on this virus. Yes, I believe some are using this virus to hurt President Trump. But the virus is still out there. The virus is still killing people. And if you just believe in general herd immunity, okay, yes, that means we might get through it faster. But New York City basically reached herd immunity, but they also had 33,000 people die in the state of New York. I don't want that across the country. We've already had too many people die because of this virus. I don't want more people to die because of the virus than have to. So I'm going to talk more about that on the morning show. But it is something that I wanted to mention here, that we definitely still need to take this virus seriously. But it's sad to see Herman Cain go. I was talking in the last segment about Trump and his tweet and how his tweet really is divisive. Mm-hmm. But I think people forget just how divisive Obama was as president. Mm-hmm. Obama was a very divisive president. I know a lot of people on the left don't want to admit this, but the difference between him and Trump is Obama was just a lot more subtle about it. He was divisive, but Trump is very in your face about his divisiveness. He's very overt and obvious about how divisive he is.
The old bull in the china shop routine.
Yeah, exactly. Obama is incredibly divisive, but he's subtle about it. He throws in these things and then wraps it in a bow of, this is all about unification. This is all about the best for the country. He wraps it in a way where he acts like, I'm just trying to unify the country. But in the inside of the package, it's just more division and a lot of hatred for the other side. Well, we saw some of that today at John Lewis's funeral. He gave the eulogy for John Lewis's funeral. We're going to get to that in a little bit. We also have to talk about why the Democrats lost their mind at the hearing with the Attorney General Bill Barr. I think it's all because of what I've been talking about, the cold Civil War. The fact is, when you're in a warlike mindset, of course you don't want to hear what the other side has to say. When you believe you're in a war and you have to do what it takes to just defeat the other side at all costs, well, then, of course, you're just going to automatically believe the worst of what Bill Barr, is accused of. You're just going to believe it, and you're going to believe in the worst of what Trump is accused of. So if Bill Barr actually tries to explain the truth to you and tries to actually have a conversation and defend himself, you're not going to want to hear it. Of course not. He's the enemy. He must be destroyed because this is war. I think that's just what happened at that hearing is just another effect of that. So we'll get to that and much more on this edition of Beyond Reason Radio.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
So Joe Biden just put out a tweet about a minute ago.
He did, or his staff did?
Well, yeah, you have to wonder. But he said this. He said, "You won't have to worry about my tweets when I'm president." I mean, true. You have to worry about a lot of other things. Like if he can actually have tweets, if he can actually put out tweets, or,
if he knows what they are.
Yeah, so, okay, but I mean, it's true. He probably won't have to worry about his tweets too much. Welcome back to Beyond Reason Radio. Joe Biden, of course, running for president, but he was Obama's vice president. Haven't heard too much from Obama lately, except today. He gave a eulogy at the funeral of civil rights leader and Democrat politician John Lewis. And this is just a reminder that Obama was a very divisive president. He would put in these little jabs against people on the other side and then wrap it in a bow of America's great unification, all of that stuff, hope and change. But when you actually listen to what he said, incredibly divisive. Here is part of the eulogy. Not all of the eulogy was bad. Some of it was fine. He's a great speaker. I know a lot of people say Trump's the best communicator ever as president. I deny that completely. I think Reagan was probably the best. FDR was probably one of the best. Lincoln was probably one of the best. But I think Obama is actually up there. He was a great communicator and is a great communicator. And that's what makes what he says sometimes even more dangerous, because people get lost in the eloquence of what he's saying. But he goes after Trump and, of course, conservatives here, talking about John Lewis's legacy.
But today, we witness with our own eyes police officers kneeling on the necks of black Americans. George Wallace may be gone, but we can witness our federal government sending agents to use tear gas and batons against peaceful demonstrators. We may no longer have to guess the number of jelly beans in a jar in order to cast a ballot. But even as we sit here, there are those in power who are doing their darndest to discourage people from voting by closing polling locations and targeting minorities and students with restrictive ID laws and attacking our voting rights with surgical precision, even undermining the Postal Service in the run-up to an election that's going to be dependent on mail-in ballots so people don't get sick.
You see what he's trying to do here? He's trying to equate Black Lives Matter in the protests like in Portland or the protests like they had in D.C., he's trying to equate that with the civil rights movement back then. Oh, they're equal in what they represent, of course. But he's also trying to equate Trump and Trump supporters to the racist segregationists in the South, like George Wallace. See, if you're someone who believes in securing the vote, if you're someone who believes in stopping violent protests in places like Portland, if you're someone who believes in those things, if you're someone who believes in standing up for our law enforcement and understands that the vast majority of our law enforcement are not racist and are not violent against people unnecessarily, then, oh, well, you're just like the segregationists in the South. You're just like George Wallace if you're a conservative Trump supporter today. You see what he did there? That's incredibly divisive. Obama was an incredibly divisive president, and he continues to be incredibly divisive. Don't buy this argument that the divisiveness in our politics all started with Trump. It's not true. It's just not true. This is obvious. But Obama here, he admits, some people won't like what I'm saying, but of course I have to say it. Here it is.
Now, I know this is a celebration of John's life. There are some who might say we shouldn't dwell on such things. But that's why I'm talking about it. John Lewis devoted his time on this earth fighting the very attacks on democracy and what's best in America that we're seeing circulate right now.
So you understand, the left says Trump's a demagogue, but what do you think Obama is doing there? He's just doing it to the other side, so it's okay. And he's wrapping it in the legacy of John Lewis, so it's just like the civil rights movement. Yeah, the right's just, we're racist and bigoted just like they were back then against blacks. If you believe in voter ID, if you believe in securing the vote, which is necessary, oh, well, you really just don't want black people to vote and you're racist. Even though a lot of blacks believe in voter ID because it's kind of insulting to them to say, oh, what, you can't get voter ID on your own because you're black? Most blacks are like, yeah, I have an ID. I can get it. Thank you. You don't have to talk down to me. Great tweet here by Eric Erickson on what Obama did today. Says, if a Republican said the sorts of things at a funeral that Barack Obama is saying, the very reporters currently nursing, I don't know if I can say this on the...
Then don't. When in doubt,
nursing their blank would be furious about how divisive and partisan this guy was. Yeah, of course. I mean, when Trump says something like that, he's divisive, partisan. He gives an inauguration speech, talks about the problems in the country, and it was just divisive. It was
dark.
It was dark.
Yes.
Obama says stuff like this, and wow, thank you, Obama. He says what needs to be said. Come on. So when you talk about the divide, then all you have to do is look at what happened in the hearing with the Attorney General Bill Barr. What was it? Yesterday.
Just
or
yesterday.
2 days ago. It was. I get lost in the timeline.
2 days ago.
2 days ago.
Yeah.
But I haven't had a chance to talk about it on Beyond Reason, so I wanted to.
Yesterday was the tech.
Yeah, yesterday was the tech hearing, which I do want to get to that if we have time. But the Democrats just totally went after him. I mean, they attempted to roast him. It was a persecution. It wasn't a hearing. It wasn't, and I hate these hearings. I even admitted on the morning show, I did not sit and watch the hearing because I hate them. I hate the grandstanding that happens in these things. They're not actual attempts to find information and truth and find answers. They're just attempts at politicians to use the mic and to use the cameras to grandstand and try to get more votes or something, get the sound bites out there. So I'm not going to sit and watch the whole thing, but I watched some of it. And I know that the Democrats basically weren't even letting Bill Barr speak. In fact, here's a montage of all of the Democrats yelling at Barr. When Barr has a chance to respond, they just say, I reclaim my time. They weren't going to let him speak because this wasn't about actually having a hearing. It was about attacking Bill Barr and, of course, attacking the president and, of course, attacking you who support law enforcement. Here it is.
It wasn't reclaiming my time. In April, times is when does something actually become
reclaiming my time? This is not a trick question.
In this country.
I'm reclaiming my time, Mr. General.
Without any remedy at all.
I'm reclaiming my time. Let me share with you.
So you got to let him answer.
Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time, sir. Reclaiming my time.
Reclaiming my time without political bias.
He said he found
in April,
evidence.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. General. Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time, Mr. Barr.
Substances.
Attorney General, reclaiming my time. There are rules by which we operate here. I would ask you to respect them.
But the 64 Act did not extend to...
Reclaiming my time, sir. In both documents...
Mr. Attorney General, reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time.
I think that's what it's...
Okay, reclaiming my time. And again, I'm happy...
Shame on you, Mr. Barr.
Can I just say...
Shame on you.
Can I just
My time has expired.
I mean, come on. Oh, we know what was happening. And it was planned. You could tell it was totally pre-planned that they would do that.
They got the talking points out there.
Yeah, but I think it made them look bad. I'm not sure that actually helped the Democrat cause because Bill Barr actually looked pretty reasonable in what he was trying to say. But why are they doing this? Well, it's like what I mentioned before. We're in a cold civil war, and the left believes that Bill Barr now is the enemy. And when you believe that he's an enemy in a war, you're not going to let him speak. You want him to be defeated at all costs. So this is just another front in that war. But Bill Barr, another reason why they're upset at Bill Barr is because he actually gave them the bold truth. And he actually had a chance to do it at least in his opening statement. In fact, here is some of his opening statement here.
The federal government is the sovereign of the United States. We have two sovereigns here in the United States, and we enforce the federal law all over the country. Every square foot of the country, we enforce federal law. The other is protecting federal property, and specifically U.S. courthouses, which are the heart of federal property in all 93 jurisdictions in the United States. And we have the obligation to protect federal courts, and the U.S. Marshals specifically have been given that obligation. Federal courts are under attack. Since when is it okay to try to burn down a federal court? If someone went down the street to the Prettyman Court here, that beautiful courthouse we have right at the bottom of the hill, and started breaking windows and firing industrial-grade fireworks in to start a fire, throw kerosene balloons in and start fires in the court, is that okay? Is that okay now? No, the U.S. Marshals have a duty to stop that and defend the courthouse, and that's what we are doing in Portland. We are at the courthouse defending the courthouse. We're not out looking for trouble.
Okay, that was actually not a part of his opening statement. That was another statement, but he's exactly right. That's why they don't like him. Now, here, as a part of his opening statement, he talks about the fact that if you really believe Black Lives Matter, you should support the police.
Unfortunately, some have chosen to respond to George Floyd's death in a far less productive way by demonizing the police, promoting slogans like "all cops are bastard," and making grossly irresponsible proposals to defund the police. The demonization of the police is not only unfair and inconsistent with principles of all people should be treated as individuals, but gravely injurious to the inner city communities. When communities turn on and pillory the police, officers naturally become more risk-averse and crime rates soar. Unfortunately, we are seeing that now in many of our cities. The threat to Black lives posed by crime on the streets is massively greater than any threat posed by police misconduct. The leading cause of death for young Black males is homicide. Every year, approximately 7,500 Black Americans are victims of homicide. The vast majority of them, around 90%, are killed by other Blacks, mainly by gunfire. Each of those lives matter.
He's exactly right. We'll hear a voice of reason on this next and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeart Radio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. We just have a few minutes left in the show, so there's some more things to get to. Let's get to these cuts here. We were talking about what happened at the hearing with Attorney General Bill Barr earlier this week, where the Democrats just basically attacked him. They tried to roast him. I thought he handled himself pretty well, though. He came off as reasonable when he had a chance to speak and had a chance to answer questions. I mean, he did pretty well. A lot of it's just common sense. And they act like this guy is just a shill for President Trump, but I see very little evidence of that. There have been times where he's been pretty critical of Trump and has disagreed with Trump. So the narrative they're trying to push, but they tried very hard. One person who watched this spectacle, I guess, and agrees with me that it was embarrassing was Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. He pointed out that, this was a joke.
It was embarrassing. Talking to the folks who were watching the hearing, Republicans who paid close attention to it, Barr's answers were actually very clear, very concise, and direct. He was not going to be bullied, and that was a powerful statement as well. The challenge, of course, is the Democrats, they didn't want to hear an answer to a question. And the other thing I want to ask you all, what happened to police reform? Yeah. If the Democrats were so serious about police reform, you have the top cop in America in a hearing for 5 hours, and they did everything except for talk about the issues that are impacting minority communities. Instead of having that conversation, they decided to do what they always do, play politics with America's future, to play politics with America's minority communities. They had no idea at all that they would present to the Attorney General about reforming anything. It was chaos. It felt like what we have it's a foreshadowing of things to come, and it is quite troubling and, frankly, helpful to our cause.
You know, it's interesting. He brings up a good point as well. Tim Scott has been pushing for some kind of police reform. You know, he's black. He's experienced racism by cops in his life, and he's pushed for it, and it's the Democrats who don't even want to hear it from him. So here's a chance to have the Attorney General and actually talk about these things. They didn't want to talk about it. They don't want to actually put forward policy that will work. They want to use this to defeat Trump and Republicans. Another person who was exactly right on this, Karl Rove, who reacted right after the hearing and said this.
I thought a lot of the Democrat questioners looked like jerks. They were there to stamp their feet, wag their finger, lash out at the Attorney General and not give him a chance to answer their questions. And if he did get an answer in to their questions, they immediately ignored it and stomped off and went on. This was embarrassing. Why Chairman Nadler? I have to give the Democrats credit. They obviously prepared this. They knew their attack lines. They knew how to say, this is my time. I'm taking back my time. They knew how to control the dialogue, but they come off looking like jerks.
I mean, he's right. He's exactly right. And this is not some big-time Trump supporter saying that. I mean, but he's right. In talking about the cold Civil War, one person who I think fights the war very well is Texas Representative Dan Crenshaw. He was on Fox earlier this week talking about what the Democrats are doing right now. And he says we should actually listen to them. But the reason why we should listen to them is very interesting. Here it is.
I think a lot is at stake, okay? And my suggestion to the American people is start listening to Democrats. We have to listen to what they're telling us. They talk about defunding the police. They talk about making excuses for violent mobs. Let's take them at their word. They want to destroy the things that bring us together, our common bonds, our founding, our love of country. And why did they do that? Why did they say those things? Because fundamentally they want to dismantle our country and its institutions. That's not my words, that's their words. Dismantle our economic freedom, our border security, our energy sector, all of it. Now, I don't think most Americans want that. I think we want a renewed sense of faith in the country. I think we want to have our kids love our country again. I think we want to restore of faith in our police forces, restore safety in our communities, and we want to rebuild our economy. Okay, we had the greatest economy that our country has ever known. We want to rebuild that. We want to rebuild our infrastructure along with it. So you're seeing a very clear choice in 2020. It's chaos versus safety and security. It's socialism and doubling your tax rates versus economic freedom. It's government takeover of your health care versus keeping the doctor that you trust. It's acquiescence to China versus holding China accountable. These are important themes, and the difference could not be more severe. This is not President Obama's Democrat Party, and people need to realize that.
Or maybe it is President Obama's Democrat Party. just want to throw that out there. Maybe it actually is. Makes a good point, though, that one thing I really like about him, like I said before, is he fights, but I like how he fights. Mm-hmm. My biggest problem with Trump isn't that he fights, it's how he fights sometimes. Sometimes you get so distracted by some of the crazy stuff he throws out there that you forget about the fight. I think we should fight and should be bold and should be strong against the other side, especially when it comes to what's going on in the culture war in this country. But we need to do it in a smart way. Well, we only have a couple of minutes, Tom Benson. Should I give my quick take on the tech hearing yesterday?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I want to real quick, let's hear from Zuckerberg, who made a really good point during the tech hearing yesterday, once it actually happened, because there were technical difficulties apparently throughout the hearing. Ironic there, but here's what Zuckerberg said.
The most popular messaging service in the U.S. is iMessage. The fastest growing app is TikTok. The most popular app for video is YouTube. The fastest growing ads platform is Amazon. The largest ads platform is Google. And for every dollar spent on advertising in the U.S., less than 10 cents is spent with us.
There is so much talk that these tech companies are monopolies. They're so big and they need to be busted because the antitrusters are coming like Teddy Roosevelt did in the early 20th century, and they're going to bust them up because they're so big and anti-competitive. But want to know what the biggest proof is that these companies are not monopolies? Because they had to get 4 different CEOs to show up there. And those 4 different CEOs for these 4 different tech companies compete with each other. Amazon competes with Google and Facebook for advertising. Amazon also has to compete with Walmart, believe it or not. But Facebook has to compete with Google for social media and YouTube. And he mentioned all the things he has to compete with there. Google has to compete with Apple for cell phones and computers. I mean, we see this. Apple is dominant now, but they weren't in the 90s. Facebook is dominant now, but it used to be MySpace. And who knows, next it could be TikTok. And Facebook still competes with Twitter and TikTok and Snapchat. This idea, they're big, yes. They're very big companies. And do I like everything they do? No. Although, I think out of all of them, I like Zuckerberg the best, believe it or not. Facebook seems to be the only one who really wants to, 1, stand up against China, and 2, stand up for free speech and free political speech. He's not perfect at it. He's much better at it than the others. But the idea that they're monopolies, the Democrats want to use this to gain more control, like they always do, and Republicans want to use this because they disagree with the leaders politically. That's what really this is all about when it comes to going after these companies. It's not about helping the economy, trust me. I really appreciate you listening to the show today. If you missed any of the show, you can catch the podcast on the iHeart Radio app. You can also find it on Facebook Live as well. Follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. You can send me a friend request on Facebook as well. Appreciate you listening to the show. I will be hosting the morning show tomorrow once again. Join me then. Have a good night. Catch you next time.